Welcome everyone to Library Avengers. Rah! There is definitely a shout out to the Marvel Avengers here because this program is bringing together librarians from different buildings, different departments, all ages, coming together at one time to talk about library stuff and answer questions submitted. So feel free at any point to put some questions in the chat for us to address. We'll talk about it either if you want to talk to one of us individually or if you want all of us to answer that question, feel free to do that. I'm going to start us off. My name is Xander Miller. I am a digital strategy librarian at Kenosha Public Library. I'm in adult and digital services. So that is one department here. I will ask each of our guests to introduce each other, themselves, I should say. I've introduced myself. What I do, one of the coolest things I work with is our emerging technology. So 3D printers, virtual reality goggles, 3D scanners. We've got some plans in the works for some cooler stuff coming up. I have a drone literally inches away from my hand. So emerging technology is probably the coolest thing I do. I have everyone organized in a grid. So I'm gonna call your name and then you can introduce yourself and I will just kind of let it happen that way. So we can start. Susanna, why don't you go ahead and get started?
Me. Hi, I'm Susanna Gilbert. I'm a teen and family engagement librarian. I mostly work at our North Side branch. And oh gosh, coolest things I do. Oh, it's all cool. I have to say, I think the coolest thing I get to do is work with our teenage patrons in small groups. We just started a teen advisory board, and I also run our teen creative writing group. So my favorite thing is getting to interact with them and have small, meaningful conversations.
Thank you, Susanna. Tessa, go ahead.
Hello, I am Tessa Fox-Polachek. I'm the early literacy librarian for the Kenosha Public Library. I also work primarily out of the North Side branch, but a good portion of my job is also doing outreach at local daycares and preschools. So I'm out in the community a lot, which I really love doing. But I think my favorite thing is probably buying all the picture books for the library. It's such a fun collection to buy for, and I'm assuming we'll probably get into a little bit of collection purchasing talk later. So I'll save my thoughts more on that for later.
Kristen, well, you're up next.
Hello, I'm Kristen Kornkoven, and I am an adult digital services librarian, mostly out of North Side. And perhaps one of my most favorite things to do is to run the Mystery Lovers Book Club. The KPL has a lot of book clubs, and it is so much fun to be able to talk with patrons during the book club time.
Thank you, Kristen. Patricia or Patty.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Patty Bajabier. I'm an adult and digital services librarian with the Kenosha Public Library. I'm based at Southwest Library, and I thoroughly enjoy interacting with patrons, primarily adults, and helping them find information that they need, or to discover materials in our collections, or have foster those periods of discovery, and also work on other projects behind the scenes. I work with some of the adult programs. I also select materials for our home delivery patrons based upon guidelines that they have. And of course, it's always a pleasure to work as a team with different departments at KPL to better serve the community.
All right, thank you, Patty. So you have now met all of the librarian panelists for today. So like I said, anytime, go ahead and place a question in the chat. and figure out to help figure out, what things you want us to talk to you about. I do have I mean, I can start us off with a general question. Is for everyone as we wait for that, what got you all into librarianship? Go ahead, Tessa.
I'll go first. I actually have kind of a hilarious story about how I became a librarian. Because when I was like 5 years old, I was a very frequent library user and decided to take it upon myself to use my little scrap pieces of paper and some Scotch tape and tape little spine labels on the edge of all of my books in my bookshelf in my room, and had a little E and the first 3 letters of the author's last name. And then I, just loved books, loved reading, went on with my whole life, never really thought I was going to be a librarian until after I graduated undergrad. I went to New York and interned at Scholastic, which was awesome. I loved being around children's books and working at Scholastic, but I realized I really didn't like living in New York City. There was not enough vegetation. It was too much concrete jungle. So then I was like, you know what? I should become a librarian. And then I thought back to my youth and was like, I always knew that I always, it seemed like such an obvious choice of undergraduate school when I thought I was going to be a journalist to decide, wait a minute, I'm going to go back to school and get my master's in library science and become a librarian. So the 5-year-old Tessa is very happy.
See, I can talk about I guess where I became a librarian. So I wasn't a big library kid, which is I've said for like 5 years, including while I was in library school, is that I wasn't a big library kid. But what I really liked doing was I always thought of like things in so many different areas at the same time, and didn't want to get too deeply into them, but at the same time found everything super interesting and being able to find stuff for it. So I really liked finding new areas of information and just kind of exploring that. And then also guiding people to those cool new things was really cool for me. And then I was I think I was in my last year of my undergraduate life, and I was like, what in the world am I supposed to do? And then I was like, wait, being a librarian's like an option? That's a thing. And then I looked into what what librarians do and what some stuff there was, and I was like, librarians are pretty cool. That sounds awesome. And so yeah, that's kind of where it came from. Then I went to library school, and I thought I was going to go into archives. Clearly, I have not gone into working with archived old materials, or I thought I would be, working on what we call subject headings, or basically how we organize all of our books on the back end of everything. Clearly not doing that either. So I kind of through life just ended up in public libraries somehow. And then with digital strategy. So I kind of just ended up here. It's pretty neat.
I'll go next. Or
go ahead.
Patty. Well, I discovered librarianship because of 2 friends I had in high school. They were a year ahead of me. And I always enjoyed, of course, reading and using my public library in middle school and high school. But I knew I wanted to study liberal arts and have a broader background as an undergraduate. And these two friends said they were planning to go to library school. And thanks to conversations with them, I realized that you could go into the profession from just about any background and find a specialization that would be appropriate. And of course, working with people, helping people was always very appealing. So when I went to the university, I was a history major, but I also took other subjects and area studies courses. And I thought that library and information studies would be just a perfect match. And I was always leaning towards working probably in a public library setting. So because I enjoyed research and doing some detective work, my first love in library land was in reference services. But over the course of my career, I've worked in reference, I've worked in cataloging, I've worked in outreach services, and now I'm back in adult and digital services. So it's been quite a journey, and it's a very rewarding career.
Well, I actually came upon librarianship by taking one of these career tests where you answer all kinds of questions, and librarian came up to the top. And it kind of makes sense. My undergraduate degree is a bachelor's of fine arts in theater with a specialty in technical production. And there really wasn't a whole lot of career choices out there that I was really all that interested in, but it is all about solving problems. And that is something that I find working in reference services is finding answers, solving problems, and helping people find their way through. And that was, I think, what drew me into the profession.
All right. So I was also an avid library child. My dad is actually a librarian. My parents took us to the library constantly. I was a child summer reading program volunteer. I was on our teen advisory board at the library I grew up in. I was doing all this library stuff constantly. My sister works in libraries now. And throughout all of this, I was going, no, of course I'm not going to be a librarian. Of course not. Of course not. I'm going to do something else. Of course, it didn't turn out that way. But I think the main reason really that I ended up going to library school was I was living and working in Berlin, Germany, and realized that one of the things that I missed most about the US was the libraries. The libraries in Germany are not really used in the same way that they are here. They're not very terribly well funded. A lot of things you have, if you want like a newer DVD, you usually have to pay for it. And I really, really missed, I read just like an insane amount and I cannot purchase that many books. I can't. So I rely on good libraries. And I missed that a lot. And I realized, okay, this is something I really care about. I've been working either with children or with books in every other job I've had. So maybe it's time to stop fighting this. And realize that this is the natural combination of those things.
Okay, I've got two things to add to this. Firstly, for Susanna, sprechen Sie Deutsch? Okay, I don't either. So
a little. If you were a German 3-year-old, I would be able to make my own way in the world. But beyond,
I am probably a German like half-year-old in terms. So, and also I may have heard or seen some cats. Is there other pets in the background? Do you have them nearby to show them off? Or okay,
so
I was wondering.
I think Tessa's got a cat in in room, I have two who are screaming at me from the other side of the door.
Okay.
I have one in very close proximity. It's also sort of like, to be a librarian, I think a lot of people with cats tend to gravitate towards librarianship, it seems. So it might be kind of on topic. Oh, and of course, there she goes. Oh, big flop on the ground.
All right. I wanted to bring that up. So I know we've done, oh gosh, what's the children's, we do like a cats versus dog thing in children. So you might, well, one of our youth people might be able to tell me which one that is.
We talking about the Catman or Dogman versus Cat Kid election that we did?
Yeah. So I guess general question here. Cats, dogs. I'm a dog person. I don't know if we can break a stereotype here. I know we've got 2 cats, 1 dog. Patty, Kristen, what do you think?
I'm going with cats.
Well, I like cats and dogs, but when I was growing up, because I had allergies, I could only have a pet outside. So I had 3 different rabbits at different times over the course of my childhood.
Okay, so we can break. Well, rabbits are an option. So maybe next poll we do needs a rabbit book as a third option instead of cats, just a cat, dog kid and a cat. So okay. So I know for me, at Kenosha Public Library, this is actually my first professional librarian position. So I know there's whole journeys here. I guess what has your journey leading to Kenosha Public Library been so far? I know this is my first spot, so I was in grad school, I was applying for jobs. This was my first one. So I don't have a long journey. I imagine some of you all may have a longer journey, a shorter journey. We'll see. But what was that journey like for you?
Dare I go first? 2 questions in a row.
Feel free.
Yeah, mine, let's see. I've been a degreed librarian. This is my 3rd library. I've worked in youth services for all of them. I knew once I wanted to get into librarianship that I wanted to do youth services work. And I'm an early literacy librarian in my current role at KPL, and my previous role was also early literacy. The one before that was just a general youth services librarian, where I had to do everything under the sun, from babies all the way up to teenagers. I bought all of the materials between those age ranges. I did programming for all those age ranges. It was a very small library, so which is pretty common that you only have, a lot more limited degreed librarians on staff, and therefore they're doing all of the things all of the time. And it's a lot. And I definitely am very happy that I went the early literacy route. So that's kind of like ages 0 to 5 more, which is really fun to see kids grow and learn to love the library and learn to love books. And I spent a lot of time doing story times, including a baby story time, toddler story time, and preschool story time at my last library, which was the Grays Lake Library in Grays Lake, Illinois. And I think my favorite thing, first time, mostly moms, but also a few dads and occasionally grandparents. But it was really special to see those first time moms make connections with each other. A lot of the times it was the first time their babies were socializing with other kids, especially ones that they weren't super familiar with, like maybe immediate family. And just to watch those connections grow and see, them get in the habit of coming to the library, and to be able to hear from the parents, you're the only person outside of the family that they know and recognize and go to and look forward to seeing. So it's really fun to see that growth in the kids. But I'm born and raised in Kenosha County. So it's working at Kenosha Public Library is awesome. I was trying to get in here for a couple years. and finally managed to do it. So I love being able to live and work in the same community. Because Grays Lake, well, my 45-minute drive was great time to listen to audiobooks, 45 minutes each way. Now it's, you know, a lot less of a commute time, but I also get to see those benefits and instill those values of literacy and libraries and, you know, curiosity and lifelong learning. I get to instill those values in the kids in my own community where I live. So that's pretty cool to me.
Anyone else want to speak on that? What's your journey here been?
Well, I'll go next. When I was studying in library school, I worked as a student assistant in one of the campus's large libraries, an agricultural and life sciences library, and they had undergraduate and graduate students from across the US and all over the world utilizing the materials or the resources in that library. So it was really fascinating. It was an interesting way to learn about some of the sciences, all these different subject areas, and meet people and their different needs and helping them find materials in journals or just navigating in the library system itself. And I didn't grow up I wasn't born in Wisconsin, but I spent a good part of my childhood in one of the communities in Wisconsin. And when I finished graduate school, Kenosha Public Library was hiring part-time librarians or was looking for a part-time librarian. And this was before part-time librarians were part of the system. So it was during a challenging economic period, and I thought this might be a way to enter the profession, and it really worked out well. After a few years, a staff member in a different department retired, so I was able to learn about cataloging and collection services in that position. And as I mentioned earlier, I've worked in different departments, different buildings. So, but most of the time it's been working with adults, and it's always been interesting helping people wherever they are. And I need to stand up so the lights will go back on. There we go. And as Kristen mentioned, just helping people discover something that they're really interested in, find a crucial piece of information, help them perhaps navigate or think through situations. We sometimes make referrals to community services or agencies that might be helpful in addressing individual or family needs. And, you know, just that getting to meet such a wide variety of people from so many backgrounds and, you know, getting a different perspective on the complexity and beauty of our community.
So Patty, if I heard you correctly, so out of grad school for your library and information science degree, you started at Kenosha Public Library?
Yes, that was my first professional position. Although when I was at the university, I worked as a student assistant in that agriculture and life sciences library.
So we're in the same boat.
Yes, yes. I just worked in a few more departments over the course of the years.
A few more.
Yeah.
I think Patty might be Patty or Linda Potter, I think, have the longest tenure at KPL out of anybody on staff.
I will chime in and say this is also my first big girl librarian job. So I'm in that club as well. I had a few part-time gigs in graduate school, but I started applying for full-time positions mostly in Wisconsin and Illinois when I was finishing up, and this was the one that felt right and the one that I got an offer. So I knew I was looking for youth services, which can be competitive. So I was lucky to get the full-time right away.
I too also, my first job was with KPL. I had actually been doing field work as part of my studies at Parkside. And after I graduated, they hired me for a limited time employment, they call it. And it was just for a few months while they were waiting to fill another position. So I filled in as their business librarian, and just about the time that was ending and I wasn't sure what to do, KPL had some part-time positions open, and I've been there ever since, just kind of moving from building to building. So yeah, it was a few years where I was working part-time at KPL because they weren't hiring full-time for a while. So.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of the librarian journey is just getting that right opportunity. A lot of the times you have to just put in the time. I've worked two different libraries, part-time positions at each while I was in library school. And, you know, I've worked circulation, I've worked the adult reference desk, I've done youth, I've done, you know, some outreach. Like, you really just kind of have to bounce around and take advantage of the opportunities when you can. Because there's only some, especially, you know, depending on your type of librarianship that you get into. But like for public libraries, there's only so many public libraries and the budget only allows for so many degreed librarians. So it's definitely a competitive field. And starting out, I think one of the things that every librarian's journey has in common is, you know, lots of applying, lots of rejection, and maybe a little bit of bouncing around at, you know, libraries where you know you don't want to stay, or departments where you know you don't really want to work in, but you got to just beef up that resume a little bit, and eventually stars will align.
I was one of a very small handful of people in my graduating cohort who actually got a job offer before I graduated. There are people I graduated with who are still working outside the field and applying for library jobs. I think that's something that people don't necessarily know, is that it's competitive, it's a small field, and can be a battle to figure out where you want to be and then get there.
So I have a question has affected all of our jobs. Since we're talking about, you know, experiences and getting jobs, and now we are coming close to, I just looked like 40 minutes ago, our numbers, we're at 30% of Kenosha County has had at least one shot of one of the vaccines for COVID-19. But we've been, you know, at this point, we have just been over a year of pandemic in our community. And I'm wondering, for your jobs and your work, how has your work changed, and what challenges have been there for you throughout the pandemic? I think
Am I going to go first every time?
I was about to say, I think I'll give Tessa some relief here.
Go first, Xander. Go for it.
Well, I'll answer I'll answer the question. So I know probably the hardest time for me was right at the start of the pandemic, where we don't know what Kenosha community needs going into it, because none of us were around 100 years ago for the Spanish flu in like I feel like it was early 1920 or even earlier than that.
1918.
1918. Thank you, Patty.
Yes, you're welcome.
That's reference librarians at work. So none of us are around for that. And I mean, the internet wasn't as much a thing. Literature, for what did people do? Some stuff that was still around, but we didn't know what to do, and we had technology, so we had to think about, what is our role right now. And at that moment, it was like no one really knew. I remember sitting down with a group of librarians about how we can offer online services, what's available, and just being like, okay, we can try to do these things. I remember conversation with Jake, who was a previous youth programming librarian. Is like, okay, how can we start getting live streams of story times? How can that happen? And I just remember that whole transitioning period where we just didn't know what our jobs would be like. I mean, and I know that's interesting because a lot of the time our job is so adaptable to whatever's going on in the community. Well, the pandemic was not something we've adapted to before, and that just whole starting time period of what service looks like, what does a library look like fully digital, was difficult for me. And just that, this will be the last thing I add to it. I also purchased books for our ebooks and the audiobooks. And during that April, I spent a lot of money for ebooks and audiobooks. I think I spent a whole 2 days just going through and purchasing things for holds for our ebooks and audiobooks. And I was like a full 2 days it took for me to do that. It doesn't usually take that long, and to do that with purchasing items like ever, it might take a while to organize it, but not do all of the steps for 2 straight days, like the whole day. I'm not talking an hour, like a whole day, 2 days of work. So that was a lot of looking at spreadsheets. So that whole transition was just a time. It was difficult. So everyone else, what was your part?
Well, I'll give my impressions. Of course, initially in the beginning weeks of the pandemic, it was just very frightening because nobody knew the full magnitude of the disruption and what was occurring around the globe and how it would impact different countries. So that was very unsettling and frightening, just the uncertainties and the anticipated challenges and suffering that we were hearing about. And then the uncertainties professionally. We really, truly didn't know what would we be doing. Would we be working in a few months? We didn't know, but we had so many very capable, innovative and bright people working behind the scenes, our director and our managers doing whatever was possible to not only keep the staff safe, but also look ahead and plan. And curbside pickup, that whole concept of having patrons, the buildings were closed, but the concept of having patrons come to Southwest Library and Northside Library and pull into those curbside pickup slots and call in and, have materials delivered to them safely in their vehicles. There were so many things that had to occur behind the scenes to make that possible, to place holds, to look for things, to package them. It was phenomenally successful. I think when that debuted in late April, we had over 400 curbside requests between youth services, adult services, teen materials. I think everybody was so missed their libraries, and they were just starved for materials. And even the interactions that we had, whether it was email or phone, by phone reference, it was therapeutic, I think, for a lot of people just to reach out and connect with others. Some of us were doing reference work remotely, and we were connecting with patrons. And I just remember the first week or two that I was doing that, it was just so wonderful to be able to connect with somebody out in the community. And sometimes people just wanted to talk for a while, I think, to connect and realize, oh my goodness, I'm still hanging in there, but I'm interested in this. Can you help me find something? Or how do I find these magazine articles, or whatever it is? So, you know, truly, we all felt the lack of that human connection.
Yeah, I'll add that. I mean, it's still kind of an ongoing thing, right? Now stuff's starting to kind of open back up, and we had to totally revamp the way that we were offering programming. We started off with virtual programming, but then, especially in youth services, you had a lot of kids who then their school was suddenly virtual. So then it's like, how much screen time can a kid sit in front of a computer? And you want to be able to reach them in other ways, especially for younger kids that really need that hands-on learning and activities. So then we started doing our to-go box programs for kids, which then the adult services definitely sort of piggybacked on and got some hands-on stuff for the adults too. But that was a whole, you know, kind of evolution. Like we didn't know that that was something that was going to happen, or to the magnitude that it would happen, and how well received it would be. Oh my gosh, the feedback has been really amazing. But I will also say that it was really frightening to be in a global pandemic in a public library, you know, obviously, as many jobs were. But whereas at, you know, a grocery store, people are coming in, grabbing what they need, checking out, and going home, and you don't see that stuff come back. Whereas at a library, it's a two-way interaction. So you had all these people, you know, coming to the library, browsing through the books, picking what they want, playing with the toys, and then, oh, it's a global pandemic. And really, before, like, everything people check out, they, you know, they play with at home, they read at home, and then it all comes back and gets on hold for somebody else. And then all of the germs and microbes and fun stuff that was at the one person's house is now at somebody else's house. And that two-way transaction element, I think, was something that was very unique to libraries that a lot of other fields didn't necessarily have to think about. So that was definitely a little distressing. So we did, you know, the quarantine periods of things, which have kind of modified as this COVID reality has gone on. But the other big thing that's been hard is not seeing the kids, not doing the programming, not hearing all those little voices who are saying, I love the library. Wow, look at this book. Not getting that was really like kind of soul sucking. And then once we opened back up and kids could start to come in again and we could see them, it's like you could feel like a tangible difference in the youth department. We'd all be like, a child. It was so exciting to see them again.
Yeah, I will piggyback off of that and say yes, definitely. I think one of the biggest shifts for us in the department, but definitely for me personally, was realizing how much of our job pre-pandemic was crowd control. We would do huge children's programs, and just after school in our big branches, you know, it's all about, okay, there are a lot of children right here all in one space. And so having sort of that piece gone, you know, I had a regular Friday afternoon program where I would have, you know, 20 to 50 people that I was doing activities with, and suddenly without that, it's a very different thing. And even our virtual programming and our to-go boxes and stuff, it's sort of pieces of that, but it's never all of it at once. So getting used to that has been a big shift. But I realize, you know, and I is this true of you as well, Xander? I've been at KPL longer during the pandemic than I was before it started.
I think so. Because I would have started. Yeah, it would have been longer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we started around the same time. So that was just a super weird thing to realize too, is that I have done the pandemic version of my job longer than I did the pre-pandemic version of this job.
Same for me too, really.
Yes.
So yeah, it's been interesting. The other thing that was sort of distressing in all this is, you know, we are so entrenched in the community and see all different types of people that come into the library. And so when everything starts shutting down, we're really worried about our patrons who really rely on us and depend on us for, you know,
right.
even if it's just printing something, which seems like such a non-essential thing in the grand scheme of COVID realities. But I mean, if you've got to, you know, apply for unemployment and you don't have a computer, or you need to, you know, figure out some sort of governmental assistance or fax some medical paperwork or something. I mean, it can be really important, an important line of access for people just to be able to get in. And we have a decent amount of people experiencing homelessness in Kenosha, and a lot of them rely on us just for somewhere safe and comfortable where they're allowed to be during the day. And you know, our kids who now then all of a sudden weren't in school, that maybe their home lives aren't the best, and they're shut off from some support systems outside of the home. There was a big worry about what's going on with our families and our kids and our adults. Like, it was a hard time. So not only were we worried about ourselves, obviously, we were worried about our community and how it was affecting them, and how are they going to bounce back from this? How are we going to bounce back from this? As a library, and you know, what new needs is this going to bring in our community that we have to now adapt again and see how we can go from there.
Yeah, I think when we got our phone lines and reference, I remember Patty bringing that up, because it felt so weird to get. We linked our cell phones essentially to our phone line. It was weird getting a call on my cell phone and answering it. It's like Kenosha Public Library. And during the day, it was surreal, but you know, there really were people asking, just like, hey, are you guys okay? Are you in the building? You know, or is it okay? Like, there's a lot of care. I remember the first few story times when people tuned into those, the comment sections were so heartwarming, that parents would be posting, is like, you could see my little kid participating all around. That was one of my favorite things. I still go and look at the comments in those every so often just to see people joining. I remember we were one of the libraries that started early too, because we had people from all around the country, and actually, well, really the world, kind of tune into some of our story times near the beginning of the pandemic. I remember specifically someone from France tuned in or something like that.
That was probably because of me. I've got some friends in France, and we're sharing my story times. I'll take credit for the French who were joining us.
Thank you, Tessa, for making Storytime global. But yeah, there's our adaptation to service was a big pivot, just being able to see our regular patrons again. And now we see some people in person. So if you didn't know, we are open on the inside now. So surprise. One question, and please feel free to put questions in the chat as we go through. One question I want to ask is, as librarians, what has been one of your biggest accomplishments?
Well, I will go because I just am the talker. I guess, well, this kind of ties into the last question too, is, you know, once the library was closed, librarians and library workers, like many fields, we wear many hats. We do all sorts of different things. And I've worked in a public-facing library position at a public library for probably the last 6 years now. And so when we closed and we weren't open to the public anymore, it was like totally a different world. And pre-COVID, I would always joke about how, we should just shut down for a couple weeks and get all this stuff done that we can't do when we're open because we're just so busy, helping patrons, doing other things as we're supposed to do. But I'd always joke, oh, we should just close down and we can get all this stuff taken care of and then we could reopen and it would be amazing. And that's sort of what happened in some ways, although it was not for a great reason. But that was one of my big accomplishments during COVID while we were closed that I would have never had time to do when we were open, giving my other job duties, including a lot of school outreach, which obviously stopped once the school shut down, was we did some big relabeling projects and youth services. Not to go too nerdy into the librarian end of things, but like before, most things in the library are organized by the author's last name. But especially in youth services, you have a lot of all these media tie-in type things where you have a lot of different authors who are writing the books. So somebody would come and say, I'm looking for, Star Wars books. They'd be all over the place. You couldn't just direct them to one area. But so while we were closed, I was able to go through, which I'm still not done because we opened back up and I got busy again. But I was able to go through at least at some locations and do that recataloging. So now all of the Star Wars, for example, are all under Star Wars instead of 20 different authors' last names, and you can't just point somebody in one direction. So I think that's been a big ease of findability and increased ease of browsing for really staff and patrons alike to be able to find those more easily. And that's been a big accomplishment, as well as rearranging the Northside Children's Room, which I couldn't do. But then once we were closed, I'm like, hey, can we do this? And we did, and it's amazing, and I love it. And when I'm having a bad day, Susanna knows this, when I'm having a bad, stressful day, I just go in there and look at it and think about how beautiful it is now and how I'm so happy about it, and it cheers me up.
Well, I'll mention one of the interesting phases of my career in adult services. A number of years back, we had the opportunity to apply for competitive grants in which we would partner with an organization and work to preserve and digitize local historical resources. So we partnered with the Kenosha County Historical Society and Museum, or the Kenosha History Center, and took the most of the materials in these 3 digitization grants, which took place over a number of years, were from the Kenosha History Center archives. And we were fortunate enough to be awarded the grants, and we worked with the University of Wisconsin Digital Collections Center. They did the technical work of scanning and web hosting, but we worked very closely, a number of us worked very closely with the archivist and curator of collections to describe and do the metadata work associated with all of these hundreds of images that were on 19th century lantern slides and also glass plate negatives. And then there were also some books, and one of the grants involved some of the lost industries of Kenosha, some of the major manufacturers in the late 19th, early and mid 20th centuries, and they also had advertising materials from some of those companies. So it involved a lot of detail work, describing the materials and checking with the History Center. We have questions about the notes associated with this image. Is this what you mean? Or what date should we put here? Or, you know, back and forth. So that was, I figure between planning, implementing, and doing the final reports for those 3 grants, it probably occupied about 6 years of my life, off and on. But I think that's one of those legacy projects where, as long as the University of Wisconsin Digital Collections Center can keep those, you know, up there online, those will preserve things that were really inaccessible to people. And some of those lantern slides or glass plate negatives, they didn't have any print copies of those images. So this brought back the photographers and the people associated with the events in Kenosha back to life, so to speak. So that was very rewarding. And it enabled us to do something that you never know if you'll have another opportunity to do. So we took advantage of openings and were fortunately successful.
That's awesome. I learned something new, and you're usually across the office from me. So, anyone else, their accomplishments? I can go next if you want to, but okay, been given the hand signal. This is hard because there's like, for me personally, what's been my greatest accomplishment, or I think what's had the greatest impact on the community. So for me, there's like 2 ways to answer this question. For me personally, I think back to, well, not that long ago. I think for me personally, one of the things that impacted me emotionally the most was reopening Uptown after the Jacob Blake shooting was one of the things that hit me emotionally at the time. Because I remember the Monday, just kind of being like emotionally dead. And just, I got there, I was doing at the time I was doing, at the same time, our inclusive services assessment, golly gee. And so I was like, oh, well, I'm going to work on that today. We went home early that day. And then that Monday night, sorry, I was just like, what can I do? And I talked to our director, talked to our boss, and the director, Barbara Etten, I went to her and it's like, you know, we can try to open Uptown. And she said, sounds like, you know, we can do that and I'll go with you. It was like, I think the exact line she'd said. And Wednesday there weren't, you know, wasn't a fire. There wasn't violence right there or much unrest right in the center on that Wednesday, but we went and opened it, which is great. And that it was emotionally hard hitting, to go and provide service in the Uptown neighborhood at the time. That's probably the hits personally. Probably the highest, or like, for me, highest impact is something I did fairly early, but has been maintenance work, and it's been missing for the entire pandemic, is probably technology appointments. When we set up technology appointments, it was a big need community wise, and we needed to figure out a way to do it. A way to do it was really the hardest part. Not even the skills to do it, but just the organized fashion to organize and make sure they happen ongoing. And so that was setting those up in like 2 months after I started, really getting started in August of 2019. which seems so far away now, was such a huge thing. And now, like Susanna mentioned, we've been without tech appointments longer than we've had them since I started now. I can't wait to get them started again, because now we've done over the pandemic a lot of training, different, management of our branches and how we get people to do stuff. So I can't wait till we can get started with them again. And I can, the comments we would receive, the compliments we would receive for that service was incredible and fulfilling. So I guess there are really two aspects of answering that question for me.
I'll go. Sorry, she's being really loud now, so I hope you can hear me over the cat. I would say for me, this is a little bit personal, and I think it has a great impact, so that worked out nicely. But with all of our branches, we have our 4 branch libraries as well as the bookmobile outreach vehicles. I think it can be really hard to figure out the correct balance of staffing and of resources. And, that's an ongoing thing that all of our managers really work on. And when I was hired, it was with the intention that I would be more of a youth services presence at our Northside branch than we'd had previously. And one of the things that I pushed for really early when I started, and we have now seen come to fruition, is having an actual children's service desk in the children's area of Northside. When I started, there was not a desk there. So we got a desk, and then we got a computer for the desk, and it's been an ongoing thing. But now we have a fully staffed, most of the hours were open, service point there, where we did not before. And I like to think I had a hand in that. It's something I was definitely very vocal about the need for, that we needed to be serving our families on the north side in that direct way.
You definitely had a hand in that, Susanna. Way to go.
I don't know if I can pick out the greatest thing that I've done, but one thing that I've worked on for a long time was the tour at Simmons. The history of the building is so very interesting, and there had many years ago there'd been a tour, but we hadn't been doing it, and I had really sure we need to have a behind scenes tour. And I worked with several of my colleagues, and we put together kind of a walking tour and with a guide, and we'd walk through and talk about the history inside and outside. And then we also took that same tour and changed it into the Haunted Simmons tour and turned it into a ghost hunting event. To me, it was definitely a collaboration of putting it together and doing the history. And then because I'm not much for public speaking, I turned it over to Ed so that he would lead the groups. And it has turned out to be one of the most popular events. It's always been the second Saturday of every month. And unfortunately, with the pandemic, we've had to cancel. And I know there are some plans of making kind of a do-it-yourself walking tour, kind of using an app. So I've always been very proud of that work that I did on that tour.
I will add one other thing that I'm very proud of, besides reorganizing and relabeling, which organization is really another huge reason I got into libraries. I love to organize things, but that's so much of what librarianship is, right? But the other thing I'm really proud of is the ongoing and continual process of diversifying the library's collections. I think we've made some really good strides in the last few years, and we recently oh my gosh, a bird outside my window is very noisy. We recently launched our new strategic plan for 2021 through 2023. And in that strategic planning process, we had a specific subcommittee dedicated specifically towards equity, diversity, and inclusion, which previously that had always just been sort of part of the plan, but it was never its own designated plan. So I think really making sure that there is more of an emphasis on that. Most of us on this call are actually on that committee. So, but that was, I'm really proud of my personal participation in that whole process, but also the organization as a whole, I think has a new renewed commitment to making sure that everybody is seeing themselves on the library shelves and everybody is able to see somebody who is not like them on the library shelves. And that's a big thing that you talk about in the youth services library world, is the concepts of mirrors and windows and sliding glass doors, and being able to, to see your own reflection and your own self in some aspect of your identity, but also being able to get an idea of what it might be like for somebody else's identity and somebody else's lived experience. So, I mean, books are really a powerful tool in being more empathic and having understanding of other people's lives. And so I'm proud of being somebody who gets to buy those books that can have that impact, that can make somebody feel seen and welcome and heard, and can make and open people's eyes to, realities and different experiences out there that they probably might not have known about before. So, yay for libraries.
Yay for libraries, indeed. As it's, we're here, it's National Library Week, if you didn't know. We have it in the event description, but so there's part of Library Week is, it's libraries, but I feel like it's also about the communities that libraries serve. So I've got another question for everyone. What has been your favorite interaction with a Kenosha community member or patron they've worked with, maybe teamed up with, collaborated with, helped at a desk? Of course, nothing identifying, of course, but and I can start with this one. I also feel like it'll get stolen. So so I think one of my interactions, especially recently, is during we've had a lot of job help going on, whether it be applications, and I actually worked with Patty to help this patron out one of these days. They've been in quite a bit, but they'd gone through the process with us, newer to the community, applying for a job, and struggling and I don't know if applying to jobs is a lot harder when everything's digital and websites don't know how to make good, they don't know how to make good recruiting websites. I don't know if anyone's been there before on a new one, but they make it almost as confusing as possible. But this patron was a trooper. They worked through all of it, and then they'd gotten the job, and then they had to do all the paperwork that gets in the job, and the thing is, they went to us for help, and just kind of seeing this person work through it, and seeing and being there for their frustration, and just listening and helping where we could is one of those moments that I'm just like, wow, it's good to be here, that we're a service that's here and available, because we have people in the community who need it and then rely on us, and then have this can-do attitude going about them, or this persevering attitude. And I could have used a number of examples of patrons who in this community who were like that, where they be starting a new business, or there are a business owner, or they're just we're gonna go ahead and do our own thing now, because the whole landscape of the community has changed. And I really like seeing our patrons right up close as we're helping them with that process and getting there. So that's been one of my favorite interactions.
All right, I'll go. I guess I've got two smaller ones. One that was definitely more recently, but one was a pre-COVID time. I was doing in-person story time visit at a local Head Start program. And as many people know, so much media is very whitewashed with the representation of the characters and, you know, the authors and the illustrators who end up getting the signed, you know, deals for the big publishers. And I remember being at a school that was filled with mostly not white kids. And one of the books that I was reading, the main character was a little black boy. And I held up the book and we were going to talk about the book. And there was, you know, this is like, these are like 4-year-old kids. And there was a little boy who said, "Hey, that's me." And then this other boy said, "No, it's me." And there was a couple kids who all kind of fought over who exactly that was in the book. And I said, it can be all of you. But just that, you know, that you could see that was something that they're not used to seeing themselves in a book. I've done so many story times, you know, with all sorts of different kids in attendance and all sorts of different characters. But it's very rare that you hear a white kid point to a picture of, you know, and say, "Oh, that's me," because that's just kind of the default. But that it was not only just one kid who said that, it was like 4 or 5 boys. They all really were like, you could tell it really meant something to them. And I left like, it can be all of you. It was such a cute moment. And it just shows the power of representation. So that was awesome. And the other thing more recently was, since COVID, all of my school outreach visits have gone virtual. And I was once we opened back up again to the public, I was just walking past and I kind of heard a patron behind me kind of quick pick up their feet like they were kind of chasing after me, like maybe I dropped something or whatever. And I heard, "Excuse me," and I turned around and it was a woman there and a young boy. And the woman said, "Are you Miss Tessa?" And I said, "Yes, I am." And she looked at the little boy and said, "See, she is real." Because he was so used to seeing me for story time online. And so that he wanted to come and talk to me and see that I was a real person. I wasn't just virtual. And that was really sweet too.
Over the years, we've all had so many memorable interactions with the public. Sometimes it is with children or teens or adults. They may be you know, just starting living their lives independently as adults, or they may be in middle age or older adults, but they can often share perspectives that, again, reinforce how important our work is. Even if it's a small interaction, it's meaningful for them or it enriches their lives. And I think with reference encounters, helping them find not just leisure reading, but also things that really could make a difference in their lives in ways we don't necessarily know. If they're coming in and asking us to find health information, or they don't know where to turn to even get a piece of information, they may not have the computer skills or internet access, and they need to contact a business or some agency. Sometimes they may have needs that aren't easy to discuss, and they just give you a little bit of information, but you can help guide them in the right area. And we all know that sometimes people are having, especially now, such incredibly traumatic or stressful experiences. And sometimes just a bit of kindness and patience can make their day just a little bit better. In another area, sometimes people contact us. They may send us an email or mail a request to find a story that's buried in newspapers, old newspapers on microfilm, or in a database related to Kenosha history. And as long as it's narrow enough, we can do our best and dig and do keyword searches and use our detective skills and try to locate something. And that's rewarding when you finally find something, or maybe you solve a mystery that a family didn't know about. They knew something about a grandfather or an accident, or didn't really have information about maybe a parent when the parent was younger. And just finding a piece of information about that individual can make a world of difference to them. So.
I don't know. I'm always really bad at remembering the specific interactions when somebody asks me, but I always have two favorite sort of types of interaction. And one of them is, I work a lot with our teenage patrons. So you don't get as many of the, cute little child stories. But one of my favorite things, honestly, is when they tell me something that I don't always want to hear, but they trust me to hear. There are some who, are saying things to shock, but it is always really amazing to realize when they're coming to you because you're an adult that they actually trust. And a lot of them don't have a ton of those in their lives. So those interactions are always really amazing. I obviously will not give detailed stories in that regard. But the other I would say is, again, I work with some of our older kids, and there's a very specific brand of like 10 to 12-year-old who just does not want to take book recommendations. Their parent has brought them in and they do not want to hear what you have to recommend, and you hand them a book and they say, And when you can get that kid to take a book, to get excited about a book, it's like the peak of my day. It's so satisfying.
I will piggyback off of that and say that, right, you get a decent amount of questions in youth services from adults saying, my kid doesn't like to read. And, after doing the dance of, well, what are they into? What are, and just kind of exploring what are maybe some books or movies that they like? What are some of their hobbies? And doing the investigation and, reading that person correctly and trying to narrow it down and find a couple things that maybe would check some boxes for that kid who thinks they don't like to read. And then a couple weeks later, you see that adult, whether they're, maybe they're with their kid, hopefully, but not always. But then they come back and you can tell that they liked the book. They either tell you, they love the book and need something else like it, or they're just there and all of a sudden much more, like Susanna was saying, they're much more willing to take your suggestions once they're able to see, oh, maybe they do know what they're talking about. Maybe they can help me find a book that I actually like. Though getting somebody turned on to books, especially when they don't think they are, is super rewarding.
I'll add something that we all do routinely, and of course we know that practice makes perfect, or nearly perfect. We're all accustomed to using the catalog and using the filters to try to locate something that meets a patron's needs or reading interests, or maybe they're trying to track down a song, a cherished song. And sometimes patrons are interested enough that they want us to share tips and tricks with searching the catalog. And of course, the complexity of our catalog includes all the public libraries in 4 counties. So, and all these different formats and results. So it can be a bit overwhelming. So it's enjoyable to either do that work to make it less frustrating for them, or point out things where they might have successful results at home. But that's an essential tool that we just utilize all the time without thinking.
Definitely. I'm glad you brought that up, Patty, because that's so much of librarianship, is providing people, you know, with information and with the materials. But one of the most powerful things is equipping that person with their own ability to find that material too, that, you know, they have some agency and tips on how they can go about that. This is something that you don't need a librarian for. Really, you are capable of doing this, and here's how you can do it. I recently had a family who was new to the library, and it was on a Sunday afternoon or something, and we were kind of slow, and I went through the whole spiel about how to use the catalog, and the little girl must have been, I don't know, maybe like 10, and there she was, you know, I'm gonna look up this, and then she did, and she said, okay, it says it's this, so I know it's over here, and then she went and got it and showed me, and it was really cute. I'm like, I just witnessed the birth of a library user, and it was awesome.
I do want to add, on a similar vein to all of that, and like why tech appointments was so important to me before, is one of the things that I hear all the time is my device is smarter than I am at the beginning of the tech appointment. I see all the heads nod because we hear this so often. Someone's so demotivated to use their devices, any sort of technology. And then 45 minutes later, I hear them say, okay, I think I can do this. Or coming to another appointment, or coming in the next day and being like, yeah, I did this thing. I was able to do it now. I can do it myself. It's just, it is a beautiful transformation. I like seeing resiliency. And people build that amongst themselves. So I love seeing that transformation, seeing that connection between the catalog and for finding help or working through all that. So it's one of those great things I like seeing in the community.
One thing I'd like to point out is that sometimes we do a lot to curate collections of resources to make it easier for patrons or online users to find very valuable information. And since tomorrow is the spring election, I believe Kristen has been instrumental in helping to bring all of that information in one place on our website that's scattered all over in newspapers and various websites. And so perhaps she'd like to say a few words about what's behind that voter registration guide, or
Yes, well, firstly, I'd like to give a lot of credit to Xander too, because we worked on this together. To me, voter registration is like, voting is the most important thing you can do in this democracy, and I'm very passionate about that. And for years, I've been really, you know, pushing voter registration and getting to know your candidates and when the election is and how to find that information. And we now have a very special site, its own page on the Kenosha Public Library website. And I encourage people to use it. And I have referred many people to it. And I think it's a very good page. We look for all of the candidates, and whatever information they put out there. And it is really hard to find good information right before an election. And putting it all in one place is, I think, what we do as librarians. It's what we do. We put the information where people can find it. So I'm proud of that.
I use that as a voter here. It's very useful.
That's what I was going to say. I mean, I think a big thing that might inhibit people from voting is that, you know, they don't want to vote unless they make an informed decision, which is great, but it can be time consuming and hard to go and find that information to get that informed decision. So we're doing all the legwork for them. So that's not a valid excuse for them not to vote, because we're making it easier for you. So yeah, that's a great tool, and I'm very happy that Kristen and Xander worked so hard to bring that to fruition.
And I think a lot of people don't realize how important the local elections are. These are the people who are making decisions that directly affect our lives. They're spending money. They are making the decisions that affect Kenosha directly. So I am very passionate about the voting and the importance of our voting page.
I will say, whenever I get to spread over that voting page around, I get so many like wows. Like, oh, they're like, oh, okay, these are the people are. And to be honest, doing working on the like research to go behind that, I'm like, I go through the names and like, I don't know who you are. I don't know who you are. I don't know. I would have never seen these names ever if we didn't even try to have that page, and which is concerning when it's our own government, or judges or school board or all sorts of names out there. But that's kind of, yeah, that's, to reiterate, that's kind of what we do. But we learn while we do it too. It's a wonderful thing to just part of great thing about working here.
That's one of the reasons you see so many librarians on Jeopardy, is because we get exposed to a lot of different information. And if we're lucky, a lot of it will stick with us. But Xander, really quick, maybe you want to give a brief, oh my gosh, my cat's, okay, sorry. Maybe you want to give a brief walkthrough about how somebody could find that voting page on the website.
So, on our voting page, or on our website, it starts at mykpl.info. If you didn't know that already, but you've registered, so you've seen it. So at the top of the web page, there is a section that says community. And so I'm going to actually make sure I'm saying the right thing, but there is a community section. And under that community section, there is a thing called Research Register Vote. And that is the voting, that is the link to the voting page. So the top banner says Research Register Vote, because those are the things that it is aiming to help you do, is research, register, and then go out to vote, which our election's tomorrow. If in case those instructions are a lot, you can also just type in mykpl.info/vote, and that can bring you to that page. But I do want to recognize we're at 7:27. Our event ends at 7:30. I want to thank the four of you for coming on and joining me for this, because this is one of the first times we've just asked a bunch of people to get together and talk about stuff. So thank you for your time. It's been great. I'm hoping the recording turns out beautifully. But yeah, again, thank you. And I hope we have another chance to do something like this, whether with you all or another set of librarians, because there's a whole bunch of us at this library. So there's a lot to find. But yeah, any last words from any of you before I close out? Anything you want to say?
Don't forget to check out our website for more information about our National Library Week events and things that are going on, and how you can share your KPL story.
And if you are thinking about possibly joining the profession, or you know somebody who does, by all means, have them talk to one of us or watch this program, and hopefully it will inspire them.
Yeah, I think people who are passionate about libraries are passionate about talking about libraries with other people who are passionate about libraries. So yeah, anybody who's interested in librarianship, or even maybe just working at a library part-time, you know, as for some extra income, go to a library, talk to people who work there, see what they like about it. You know, get volunteering is a great way to learn more kind of about the job part of a library, and not just the patron end of things. But also, if you are not aware, KPL is nominated for a national award for the first time. And really, this is only the second Wisconsin public library to be nominated. It's the National Medal for Libraries and Museums. And there it goes to 3 libraries and 3 museums every year. And KPL is one of 15 libraries that are nominated. So we have a chance to bring home what is really the most prestigious award in librarianship to Kenosha. So that's pretty cool. And you can go on our website and read all about it. But it's pretty exciting. So stay tuned for more on that.
Thank you, Tessa. We are at 7:30. Thank you for joining us. Those of you who have, we'll see how long it takes to get a recording. But I want to say good night. Have a nice night. Have fun voting. And we'll see you at a library near you.